This week we begin with the place that used to be called Twitter. And the X factor, Elon Musk. What he's done to the platform and how his foray into US politics has revealed who he really is. Israel's unprecedented weaponizing of pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon. The disturbing ways that story has been reported. And Dark Secrets and Lies, part 2 of our report on the human cost of cobalt mining in Africa. After news emerged of a second attempt on Donald Trump's life, Elon Musk just couldn't help himself. He tweeted, "And no one is even trying to assassinate Joe Biden or Kamala Harris." Musk deleted that post. He called it a joke, but it typified the way the world's richest man is using the platform he has on X, which used to be called Twitter. His output can be impulsive, sometimes conspiratorial, occasionally dangerous, and designed to boost Trump. Since he acquired X almost 2 years ago, Elon Musk has loosened moderation on the site, allowing it to turn into a right-wing echo chamber where hate and disinformation can run rampant. He's clearly in his element there. He posts obsessively to almost 200 million followers, often promoting fringe, racist, and misogynistic ideas. In the process, Musk has muscled his way into the U.S. election debate. And wielding influence behind the scenes, in the shadows, the way most tech billionaires do, is just not his style.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, is trying to control American politics.
Critics have been accusing X of becoming a haven for extremist and hateful content.
But one of the things about Elon Musk's tweets is that it suggests like a deeper instability.
Elon Musk is the wealthiest human of all time, but he is an adolescent in terms of his approach to the world. So there are lots of reasons not to take Elon Musk's tweets very seriously. That doesn't mean they don't have effect on the world.
Twitter has a certain excitement to it. A thought occurs to you and suddenly you put it out there, you're getting all of this feedback. It can be addictive. And I think Elon Musk is drawn to that more than to money or any conventional sense of power.
Elon Musk's juvenile approach to the world of social media was on full display in his tweets long before he endorsed Donald Trump for president 2 months ago. And he stepped it up since by constantly tapping into right-wing talking points, scaremongering on immigration, obsessing over the so-called woke mind virus, and pushing false and sexist content, some of which focuses on Kamala Harris and her supporters. Musk has become a one-man echo chamber for conservatives, and with close to 200 million followers, one of the primary purveyors of disinformation on his platform. And then there was this post from this past week, immediately after the second assassination attempt against Trump.
He said nobody's even trying to assassinate Biden or Harris, which I don't think is entirely true. I think we just don't hear about it. The Secret Service doesn't broadcast all of the plots that it stops. But he deleted that tweet, partially because it seemed like an incitement to violence. And that maybe wouldn't have mattered quite so much if Elon Musk didn't have the millions of followers that he does, if he weren't as powerful as he is and as influential. So this really kicked off a storm. And then Elon Musk was like, oh, it was a joke. I was making a joke. Can't anybody take a joke?
It's very easy to see how that could be a call for violence and also hint at this sort of conspiratorial nature that because Donald Trump is being targeted, that there is some greater grand conspiracy against him and against his followers. He'll retweet people who are known to have associations with white nationalism, with neo-Nazis, people who have spread mis and disinformation and conspiracy theories in the past. He is algorithmically boosting those ideas on the platform.
The whole incident really illustrates how comfortable he is with saying things that I think most people in his station would not even consider saying publicly. He sort of sees this and thinks, you know, I would say this privately to my friends, so I'm going to tweet it out.
Which may have something to do with the culture of big tech mavens, the entitlement some billionaires seem to have when it comes to weighing in on politics. Elon Musk is part of a generation of men in tech, along with Peter Thiel of Palantir and PayPal, and others who have bought their way to influence and power.
If we have her as a president, I don't think our country can survive.
I think we're in massive trouble, frankly, with the Kamala administration, and that's my honest opinion. I think really it's essential that you win for the good of the country.
And by going all in on Donald Trump, interviewing him on X, retweeting cartoonish posts that make his allegiance clear, Musk is operating out in the open, unlike most of his peers in Silicon Valley.
His social circle, the so-called PayPal mafia, Peter Thiel, David Sachs, who are conservative figures, who are also at PayPal and are also his friends and investors. But most Silicon Valley billionaires, the movers and the shakers, prefer to be moving in silence. They like to be influential, but they tend to do their work behind the scenes. Musk is a little bit different. He really likes publicity. He has a real appetite for celebrity that he is now using in a way that maybe the rest of his cohort isn't interested in.
But he's not the first Silicon Valley billionaire to do this.
Tonight, I urge all of my fellow Americans to stand up and vote for Donald Trump.
Peter Thiel is notable for being the most vocal Silicon Valley supporter of Donald Trump. Leaders of the venture capital world also support Trump, maybe not as vocally, because they don't have as big a public following as Thiel or Musk. And because Elon Musk is so wealthy, sometimes we assume he's a leader. In fact, he's a follower. Much of what he's saying has been circulating pretty widely for 15 years in various corners of the internet. So he's not an original thinker. He is like a 12-year-old boy who has just discovered some really fun, funny, goofy, troublesome stuff, and he loves causing trouble.
Blackmail me with money? Go f*** yourself.
Owning the means of information to shape public debate has been a strategy for wealthy people for a really long time. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Mark Benioff owns Time. What Musk identified is that owning a media company is one thing, but owning a social media company is possibly even more powerful.
Particularly in the US, where free speech is constitutionally protected under the First Amendment, in a way it is not in other countries. Like Brazil, which was X's third largest market, where users must now use VPNs to get on their accounts, since the courts have blocked X over disinformation issues, and Musk's refusal to hire representatives there. Or Australia, which is working on a new combating misinformation law that could cost Musk billions in fines if he does not clean up the platform, which he only seems to do when it suits his politics. And X was recently cited by the European Union under its new social media law and threatened with a fine, again, over disinformation. None of those legal measures are without controversy. Allegations of government overreach, concerns over the precedents set. But, unlike the US, those governments are taking action.
And increasingly, a lot of policymakers in these countries are saying, you know, actually, this is a political winner for me. No one likes Elon Musk, and he's coming in representing this sort of American tech imperialism, and I can take a stand against him. So Musk and X are getting the political pushback that's been building for years as people have grown more frustrated with US tech platforms in general. It's interesting to note that this hasn't happened in America, and the reason has to do with the United States' Constitution's protections on speech.
Next month marks the second anniversary of Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. When moderators were quickly fired, hate speech made a comeback, advertisers fled, and the company's value nosedived, taking Musk's reputation as some kind of visionary down with it. Throw in his antics on what is now X, the toxic tweets, and jokes that could be mistaken for incitement, and Elon Musk has proven that you can be the richest man on the planet and still be completely out of your league when it comes to the world of politics.
I honestly have never seen anybody burn down goodwill so fast. It's sort of incredible. Elon Musk, really excited people because he had these projects that seemed like they were going to bring us into the future, right? Electric cars, rockets, like all of the sort of sci-fi things that people get excited about. So there was this shine that he had to him. And over the last 10 years, that vision seems to have contracted significantly. Going from I'm going to put somebody on Mars to I'm going to run another social media network is not that exciting.
We have a media ecosystem in the 21st century that rewards the controversial, rewards the extreme, rewards the audacious, that rewards charlatans, troublemakers, bad boys. And so Trump and Musk are bad boys, but they're not serious people, and they have tremendous power. And I think we need to be really concerned about the world we have created and whether we're able and capable of thinking and talking and learning like grown-ups to face these issues.
This past week produced a stunning escalation in the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, one that Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah said amounts to an Israeli declaration of war. The attack also introduced us to some deadly new weapons in cyber warfare. Ryan Kohls is here with the details.
The attacks in Lebanon this past week were aimed at members of Hezbollah, but injured nearly 4,000 civilians and killed more than 30 people in one of the most dangerous displays of cyber warfare we've seen. The devices used to set off a series of coordinated explosions across the country, and even in parts of Syria, were pagers and walkie-talkies, old-school, low-tech means of communication that Hezbollah used to avoid the kind of surveillance that smartphones enable. While Israel has not directly commented on this operation, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant spoke after the second day of the attacks and said the center of gravity of Israel's war is shifting to the north, along the border with Lebanon. Among regional and security experts, there is zero doubt that Israeli intelligence agencies are involved in this attack. Media reporting, both within Israel and around the world, has cited Israel's track record in operations like this. And sources in the Netanyahu government had indicated moves were being made to step up operations against Hezbollah. Just how Israeli security forces executed these attacks is being pieced together, and the theories span global networks of telecoms hardware production, from Japan to Taiwan to Hungary, international supply chains, and the various points at which Israeli operatives could have infiltrated those systems. The remote detonations were carried out using batteries designed to overheat to the point of explosion, chemicals being placed in the devices along with small metal balls to maximize the casualty count.
Thanks, Ryan. And we'll have more later on some of the disturbing ways that this story has been covered. But first, part two of our look at cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. Cobalt is used in the batteries of smartphones, laptops, and electric cars. It is a crucial mineral in the global push to transition to renewable energy. In our previous episode, in the first half of this report, we looked at how the mining sector in the DRC is split in two between big industrial mines and the unregulated sector called artisanal mining, and how both can be difficult and sometimes dangerous to report on. Now we are turning our attention to when journalists do manage to get access to those mines, the kind of coverage that comes out of that. We also look at the global supply chain of cobalt, which big tech companies that are making billions off of the mineral insist are ethical, despite the evidence that suggests otherwise. The Listening Post's Nick Muirhead now with more on big tech's dark secret, cobalt mining in the DRC.
This is one of the thousands of unregulated, unmonitored mines in the DRC. It's crawling with children, working like modern-day slaves.
In an explosive report in 2017, Sky News in the UK showed that child labour was being used extensively in an artisanal mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC.
An army of children are at the heart of the mining production.
Companies like Apple said that they would stop purchasing cobalt from artisanal mines and get their supply only from the industrial regulated sector. But, according to a report in the New Yorker 4 years later, as soon as the media attention died down, The practice of buying artisanal mined cobalt continued.
Tech and EV companies will have us believe there's this thick wall between commercial industrial mining with heavy equipment and then this artisanal activity. And the ground truth, the reality is, it's all coming into the formal supply chain.
Quand les minéraux quittent le puits.
When the ores leave the shaft, you can trace it to a point. But then it gets taken to stalls outside the big mines and is bought by traders who go on to sell it to other larger companies.
Ils vont revendre dans des grandes entreprises.
And it's at that point that what was dug by a child and what might have been excavated by some heavy machinery is mixed together, and from that point forward, it's impossible to discriminate.
What we found interesting is that big tech entities that make billions of dollars have such difficulty with traceability. Obviously, supply chain mapping is a difficult exercise, but if an organization like Amnesty is able to map out this route, which is much harder because we don't have access to a whole host of confidential information, really the onus is on them. And that's why it's not enough for companies to say, well, you know, we are not able to really understand what's happening at the point of extraction.
Being at the center of global demand is a story that the Congolese know all too well. The first time it happened was with the invention of the automobile in the late 19th century. The cars needed tires, rubber tires. Belgium's King Leopold II was the colonial ruler of what was then ironically called the Free State of Congo. During his reign, the Congolese were tortured, mutilated, and murdered in the millions to force them to meet the demand. The violence of that era is not being repeated in the DRC today, but the current global demand for cobalt is being driven by necessity. To slow the climate crisis, the world needs to transition to renewable energy, which is unlikely to happen without cobalt. The DRC sits atop an estimated 3.4 million metric tons of it, almost half of the known supply.
The Congo is blessed with enormous resource wealth, blessed but also cursed, because throughout history, this resource wealth has attracted imperialists and pirates and pillagers, kings of state and kings of industry to plunder those resources for their enrichment.
You cannot understand or really grasp what's happening in the Congolese mining sector today without taking stock of the Congolese colonial history. Today, the world is undergoing another global transition. We're trying to move away from fossil fuels, and once again, the Congo has the resources that are critical for the world to make that transition.
Who happens to have more of the world's cobalt than anywhere else? Congo. And so it's just the new story. Instead of a King Leopold, you have King Tech, but it's the same dynamic of foreign powers needing a treasure.
On our last day in the DRC, we finally get permission to go to the mines. I've been assigned 2 minders. They're seated behind me, but we're not allowed to film them. We are told that they are here for our protection, but undoubtedly they're keeping an eye on us as well. Again, accidents along the way delay our journey. This one was fatal. So by the time we reach the mines, the diggers are done for the day, and we would not get to see the mine in full operation.
The process of getting to the mines is cumbersome, the system inefficient, and some of the delays seem deliberate. You get a sense as you go through each step that there is little desire, if not a reluctance, to help journalists get here.
Which is unsurprising. Many of the connected elite here have grown very rich from cobalt, and they don't want negative coverage jeopardizing their income.
We traveled along collapsing dirt roads. Children are everywhere, digging for cobalt in a...
Because when journalists do get this far, many come back with stories of blood batteries or blood cobalt.
Ah, so this is cobalt. This is what people in this region are digging and dying for.
But despite the exploitation and hazardous working conditions on these mines, cobalt does not meet the definition of a conflict mineral. There is no fighting in this part of the country. So characterizations that suggest it is oversimplifies a complicated issue.
Vous savez, les médias parfois met les titres sensationnels.
The media can be sensationalist, and coining the phrase blood cobalt isn't correct.
because no one is being murdered. No one is holding a gun to these miners and forcing them to produce cobalt.
Il n'y a personne qui a une arme et qui force les gens à produire le cobalt.
Nos collègues occidentaux savent que
Western journalists can be superficial at times. Their research isn't always as thorough as it should be. There's always a kernel of truth in their reporting, but it's not 100%. I do pity our Western colleagues because they're not given enough time to conduct a thorough investigation. It's always for 2 or 3 days, which doesn't allow them to speak to different people or communities and cross-check information.
au moins vous pouvez recouper l'information.
It's really important to make sure that the story that is being told is the story that emerges from Congolese people, meaning it's very dangerous to fall into the trap that you hear around blood cobalt that are really portraying Congolese people as victims, as subjects to those dynamics in a way that's very dehumanizing. And ultimately what Congolese people are saying is really the energy transition shouldn't be at the cost of our land, our air, and we should benefit from it.
An estimated $6 billion worth of cobalt is extracted from the DRC each year, and yet artisanal miners earn just a few dollars a day. It is evident that in the DRC, it is the ruling class that benefits disproportionately from the country's mineral wealth. But the real money is in big tech. In 2022, Apple's annual revenue was nearly $395 billion. Microsoft turned over $198 billion, and for Tesla, it was $81 billion. But inherent in those figures is not only corporate exploitation, but also consumer complicity.
Parce que c'est anormal que Elon Musk avec Tesla.
It's abnormal that Elon Musk from Tesla, Bill Gates from Microsoft, Tim Cook at Apple are earning billions each year, but are not sharing this prosperity with the people who live where cobalt comes from.
Ça doit être de l'équité.
There has to be distributive justice. Those companies need to invest back into the country, because so many of the problems in this sector are linked to poverty. And with a better share of the wealth, those problems could cease to exist.
All of us have to rethink our consumption habits, because each time we consume, we are contributing to those demand-side forces that have unleashed this violence on the people of the Congo. All of us are participating in this unwittingly. When you bought your smartphone, or I bought mine, or anyone listening to this conversation bought their smartphone, or their laptop, or their electric vehicle, we didn't think to ourselves, aha, now when I plug in today, some child in the Congo is going to die. But that's the relationship that's been forced on us by tech companies, because these companies have not seen fit to take responsibility for the people in the heart of Africa and treat them with respect and dignity. And we should be upset about that.
In 1904, this image started circulating around the world. It shows a Congolese man looking at the severed hand and foot of his murdered 5-year-old daughter. It was his punishment for failing to produce enough rubber. The image exposed the horrors of King Leopold's reign, and he was forced to give up the Congo. And while the demand for rubber didn't ease, its procurement became more ethical. The images coming out of the DRC today don't show the same kind of atrocities, but they do tell a story of suffering and exploitation. And while the coverage may be rare, in today's interconnected world that the Congolese helped to build, we can't say that we didn't know.
And finally, back to the Israeli attacks in Lebanon. Over the past year, we have been documenting the role that news outlets can play at times of war. Their inability or unwillingness to distinguish what is legal from what is not, to consider whether a war is genocidal or not, and what kind of attack constitutes an act of terror. Imagine for a moment that the tables were turned, and that Hezbollah was blowing up the pagers and walkie-talkies of Israeli army soldiers, killing a few dozen people and wounding or injuring 4,000 Israeli civilians. Would the National Review, based in the U.S., call such an attack amazing? Would the New York Times have described it as eye-catching? Would the New York Post joke about it on its front page and describe thousands of civilian casualties, Israelis, as terrorists? Those things would never happen, because Israelis are not Arabs. They're not Muslims. And therefore, Israelis do not get dehumanized the way their declared enemies do. Sometimes it really is that simple.